My name is John Christian, and I'm a producer for basically all my life. I think I really believe that that was the thing that I was born for. So my father was a producer as well. He took me to the studios where I used to work, and that was all of the analog kind of studios back in the days. So they used to work on tapes and stuff, and that really got me into this thing. Besides that, I think I consider myself as a musician. I've studied conservatorium, piano and drums, but I think it was never my intention to be a concert pianist or whatever in that direction. I just wanted to make music. And I do that in the broadest sense. So it's not only dance music. I do a lot of pop songs for the Netherlands with some, local artists and projects like Toppers in Concert, which is one of the things that you might know. It's in the Amsterdam Arena, and what I do there is the full pre-production, but also the sound inside the arena, so it's live sound, which is completely different than producing. And after that, I take the recording that we do there back to the studio to make a mix and master for DVD production, so it's a surround mix. So that's completely a different thing, but the nice thing about doing other things than dance is that you just learn. It's so different how artists who were already there in like the 90s think about making a production. So that really got me inspired about doing things in a little bit of different way. That was also the reason why I started to build an analog studio, because basically what is here, I'm going to explain a little bit about my setup, is the heart of the studio. But when I'm in the studio, I love to do analog mixing. If you go outside here, you see a large SSL desk. Well, that's one of my favorite desks that ever existed. So I got one myself. And there is so much difference in sound if you compare it between digital and analog. Because digital, I don't think it's really fully developed yet. It's getting better. But still, if you do a mix on an analog desk, there is a huge difference in sound. And that kind of difference, most of the things that you can hear directly is that the sound is more warm. If you want to have a warm sound in a digital DAW, you really have to tweak everything to make that warm sound. And if you just put all the channels on the analog desk, it's already there. So, in my opinion, if you are doing a digital mix, it's about solving some digital problems before you can colorize your sound. And on an analog disc, you can just start right away with creating your own signature sound. So that's more or less the difference. What I try to do if I do a mix inside the box, which I'm going to do today, I'm trying to work the analog way a little bit. So trying to make the sounds warm, cut away edgy frequencies, which I do not need. And I've got one project here, which I'm going to do a live mix. And of course, we only have, not so much time as I normally take for a mix. But I've just removed all the settings from every channel, and I'm going to put them back on and tell you why I'm doing the things that I'm doing to make the sound. So basically, this is my process, and that's the thing that I would like to share with you. So let me just start by explaining what I have here. Basically, what I think is that what I have here, everyone more or less has. Some have a bigger or a better computer or whatever. But what it basically is external hard drive. I need a lot of space, so here's 8 terabyte of SSD. A UAD, which is one of my best friends, because here there is a lot of analog modeling going on. And my computer, and basically that's it. I think for a lot of worldwide hits, this was enough equipment to do it with. So let's hope that what we are doing here today also can become a worldwide hit, because this is going to be the first release for myself on the freeway recordings. I'm going to let you hear the track, how it is when it's finished. And after that, I will let you hear the track when there is no processing going on, and then we're going to build it up again. And depends on how many questions you have later on. I can even maybe do a second track in the second half, but let's just see how far we can come. Also, if there is any question, I will just do a bunch of things, and then I will give you some space for questions, because I can imagine that if I do everything at once, that you cannot, come up with good questions. So let's just start with the track. This is the thing. Is this loud enough? Louder?
We've got to change, we've gone too low. Got ties to cut and worlds to let go. So hold your tongue till this day is done. And if you're here when the dust clears, we have won. We have won. We have won.
So that's the track, break and a drop. Of course, there's a second break and a second drop, but it's more or less the same. So what you hear here is a master where my idea was to make it very loud. You can see it has an RMS of minus 5.5 dBs. I think that's, if you want to go higher, it's going to be distorted. But in my opinion, this sounds clean. There is not so much peaks going on anymore, but still there is a big dynamic range. And that all was achieved by doing extensive mixing and mastering thing here, because normally I would spend, a day or maybe even two to just do mixing. Because one of the things that, I also said it yesterday, but for the people who are new here, if you send this kind of track to a label, it has to be out there. You maybe have 5 seconds for the A&R manager to make his judgment, So the first impression has to be very good. So sometimes when, I hear people sending stuff which is unmastered or whatever, of course, if it's the right track, or if you are famous already, it doesn't matter. But if you're new in this scene, you should, have to create that surprising effect. So mixing and mastering is really an important issue. Also, if you think of it, if you send this to a label and it's not mixed and not so good yet, the A&R manager might think, oh shit, well, it's a nice track, but there's so much work left. Next. It has to be out there right away. So this is what the track would sound like if you would just put all the channels on without any processing.
We have won. We have won. If you're here when the dust clears, we have won. We have won.
So completely distorted. Basically, I think the mix, the level of the mix is way too loud, but as some of you people might know me already a little bit, I don't care. To be honest, it's peaking plus 12 dBs. If you do this in analog situation, the only thing you will hear is distortion. But there's an easy way to just, get this all a bit more peaceful and not so distorted and not so loud. but then you just have to start by tweaking every instrument, of course. And as you can see, this is my mixer page. And all the plugins that were on there are bypassed. So I'm going to redo this whole thing. And one of the things that I showed you yesterday is starting with the kick and then already start mastering. So here you go with the kick. The first thing that I'm going to do is just go down in level of the whole production. So I create some space for all those instruments. Because, you know, you can just go down on every single channel, but I think it's just enough to, if the mix is in balance, go down a little bit on the first plugin of your master. So for now, let's start with just minus 10 dBs, so it gives some space. And as I told you yesterday, I'm going to take off a little bit of the sub-frequencies already. I think everything below 29 Hertz has no use. In this case, I just wanted to have a little bit more sub going on, so I cut it at 26 Hertz. And what I do, I already have a reference track in my mind. Because when you make a mix for this kind of music, one of the things you really need to achieve that it stands out between two other tracks, because this is the way that this kind of music is being used. You can just go your own way, but you know that this is DJ music, and especially this version. You know, if you're making a radio version, the approach would be different. But this is a club approach, so there is the first minute is to mix it over another track. So if you would put this in a mix of 1 hour, you should be or either better or equal to something else, but not better, you know. So what I do, I have one specific track in mind, and I put this in this Magic AB, and it's Chesto and Kashmir, because I know that Kashmir did the mix down of this track, and I'm really a fan of what he's doing. So then I make a loop of the drop of that track, because the first thing that I'm going to focus on is the drop, because if I have to make the decision between how loud the master will be in the drop, then I also know how loud the break should be to have a nice build-up, because, you know, I'm pretty sure that you all know that sometimes when you are producing, you have the feeling that the drop is not kicking as loud as you want to kick it in. So that's the reason why I always start mixing the drop first, so then I know how loud I have to make the break, so the drop will kick in the way I want to have it. In this case, it's the Secrets track. It's already a bit an older track, but still I think it stands out. And this Friday I was at Don't Let Daddy Know, and Chesto was playing there this track in the Ziggo Dome. And I think it was, sound-wise, one of the best tracks in his set. Because mixing and mastering is not only about creativity, it's also in order to create a good translation from your studio to a festival or a club or whatever, you know. So that's basically what mastering is, to make a sound which is the same everywhere where you play it, even on a phone, where you don't have bass frequencies. So this is the reference track. So what I try to do then is to, if I play my kick in a solo mode, try to make it as pumpy or as loud as it is on this Secrets track. And of course it's in another key, it's another kick, but still, if some DJ is playing Secrets and then my track, it has to be more or less the same. So that's the first thing that I'm going to do, to decide on what level my kick should be, or what frequencies I have to boost or cut from my kick, or what other processing that I have to do. So let's see how the balance is between the kick of Kashmir and mine. Okay, so the first thing you hear that it is much louder. So that's the reason for starting to do some mastering already, and of course it can be tweaked in a later stadium. But what I like to do is to have it already there, so I can fill in every gap that there's left. But first I have to create this kick thing that has to be just good. So I start with doing some compression here. with almost my favorite setting. The setting which made this compressor famous was the late attack and the fast release time, because then you can make it really bumpy if you just compress it with like 4 dBs maximum. But in this case, I just wanted to have it less bumpy, but more fat. So that's the reason to make it compress a little, or to attack it a little bit faster. So it's more smearing, and attack at the release time not so so long. So here we go with this compressor. And what you hear is that I'm boosting the track already with just like 3 dBs to get it a little bit louder, because my kick was softer, but that's also because my master chain is really not creating so much loudness already, because that's what's going to happen when I unbypass all these plugins. So this is the first thing. And then, because there's a lot of information going on in this track, I wanted to get rid of some of the dynamic range already. So I think a lot of guys would say, okay, this is totally undoable to already do a limiting. But what I told you yesterday, I'm just using a few plugins with just a little touch. So I'm not using a limiter to squeeze it all down. I just rather use 3 limiters with doing just a little bit. So here's the first limiter. So what you hear that it's not limiting yet, but that's because there needs to be space for the rest of the instruments, of course. And well, I boosted here already a few dBs, so I'm getting a little bit closer now to the Kashmir impact of his kick. Still, it's not completely there, so there we go to the next stage, and that's after a compressor. So what I said, it's not so logic to do it this way, but you have to remember that this is just a creative thing. So what I was doing yesterday is to try to put in your minds what a decent way of following plugins could be, but this proves that there are many different ways to achieve the same goal in the end. And what's happening here is that I make a mix between a compressed signal and a totally uncompressed signal. That's what the glue compressor is doing, and that's also why I'm a big fan of this compressor, because it's officially it's called parallel compression, which just means compressed mixed with uncompressed. Well, here, if you look at the settings, there's, with this kick only, not so much going on, but I can go into this plugin a little bit later when more instruments are going on already, so that you can see what it actually is doing. So let's just skip it a little bit for now. There's a lot of difference. This is my big friend, like I told you yesterday already, but here it is inside my production. As you can see, that there's a lot of boosting going on. So just to zoom in on this again, because this is one of my main elements for doing mastering. It's the multi-band compression. Others call it dynamic EQing, but it's more or less the same. You have your full frequency spectrum, and you just divide it in 4 pieces, and then you can just tweak those 4 pieces. So that goes from only the high end, and as you can see and hear, this is only the top kick going on more or less here, and it's already compressing a little bit. And the reason to have this compressed a little bit, instead of putting a compressor on the channel of the kick itself, is to be in control over this piece of the spectrum only, and not compressing the kick in general, because then the full range of frequencies is being compressed. And now I have control over these 4 elements, and there even exists a C6. You can go more in detail with that, but for me, it's just, look, this one is already like 15 years old, I guess, and when it got released 15 years ago, I already got it. So this is, my workflow. this frequency part is not really heavily responding on the kick, but we have lead sounds going on later on, and there's a lot of, you know, like around 3,500 hertz going on, because that's where the actual information of the notes is going on in this kind of track. So I left it here a little bit, you know, not working, because I know that there are lead sounds coming up. But then you go to the low end, and that's obviously the most important part of the kick. This is the part which you should feel in your stomach a little bit, and there is a part underneath. And as you can see, although I know that this is just one of the, what is it, 104 channels which is going on, it's already compressing a lot, because I want to give a good push to this kick, and I achieve that by doing this compression. And if I uncompress this is what it would sound like. And then when I boost the low mid frequencies, but then in a compressed way, this would sound like this. And then if you do the same with the low sub frequencies, it would sound like this. So without this plug-in, let me know what you think.
Yeah, pretty cool. But what I wonder is, you cut away like really low frequencies
Yes.
right at the beginning.
Yeah.
And afterwards, you kind of compress the hell out of the sub range.
Yeah. Yeah.
Are you bringing like really low frequencies alive again?
Yeah, but then in a more controlled way, because everything below what I said, 26 hertz, more or less is gone. So what we are hearing now is from, well, more or less 26 hertz, because it's, you know, there is something going on. If you see the way it's bent down, you know, I think it allows already from 20 hertz a little bit. So, yeah, indeed. But in the end, that's what I need, but not just by boosting all that kind of frequencies. But if you see what I'm doing here, it's boosting it, but then in a compressed way. That's the difference, you know. You can also achieve this low end on this kick by putting on an equalizer. But then the dynamic range of this kick is increasing. And now the dynamic range is increasing a little bit, but there's a lot of more low end going on. You know, so there's more space for this low end because it's compressed. And you can easily do this very hard compression with this low end, because there's less detail going on. If you compress higher frequencies so much with this thing, it will sound like if it's completely fully overcompressed. Tell me.
When you were in the beginning, you were pulling up the compression on the kick because you needed more volume.
Yeah.
But why didn't you just increase the volume of the kick?
Because I had to set it at a certain point, and the kick is my center point of the mixing. So I want to glue everything around the kick. So I just make a decision, this is the level of the kick, and then I start working with that. Because otherwise, if I would put up the volume of the kick later on, if there are the other 104 channels are unmuted, I would feel that I don't have enough pressure on the kick, then I want to put it higher again. And at some point, I cannot go higher anymore. You know, so I have to start with the kick and then never touch it again. Mm-hmm.
Or if I have another compressor, I just try, and then sometimes it still sounds shit.
Yeah.
Sometimes it works, but it's often if I try to set up something like this, it's more luck.
Mm-hmm.
Where I should set now the ratio, the attack release. But do you have any tips on how you choose your attack ratio?
Yeah.
For each part of this?
Yes, I do. Well, I have this. What you see here is basically the setting when you select this plugin. So it's the default setting. Basically, there are just two things that I change for a 128 kind of BPM kind of track, and that's the attack time of the sub-frequency and the low-mid frequency. The rest is more or less just the way it is. Of course, the amount of compression depends on what you put in, but if you consider the low-mid part, if you are the most important parameter is the attack time. Because once the low-mid frequency hits the C4, you have to make a decision how long the C4 must wait to do its job, to explain it in the most simple way. So what I would like to achieve here is that the low-mid frequency has the best chance, so it has to pop up just like the way it is, and the C4 has to start working a bit later, because there's another beat going on. So between those beats, the compressor must work, but not the whole time, because then the level is just going down. So that's the reason for setting a fairly slow attack time. Basically, that's the only thing that I'm doing with this thing. And for the rest, it's just like colorizing. But you have to just make a decision when the thing should start acting. So the most important thing then is the attack time. No. Yeah. Basically, there are so many rules for that, but it just depends on what you put in. You know, so the fact that it's around 90, that's where I start, and the fact that in the end it's 92 is based on, you know, what the rest is doing and how the track feels. That's also one important thing that I can tell you here. I can tell you all the techniques, but one of the things that you really have to dare is trust your own ears. And compare to other tracks, because that's personally a thing that I think is very important, you know, based on the, it should be mixed by DJs, etc. stuff. So let's go on a little bit. Let me see what's happening now between this settings, which I have now, compared to this Kashmir track. Okay, fair enough. I think my kick now starts to sound louder than his kick, but that's not a real good combination of a comparison, because I'm using a compressor, and if I'm going to put in more instruments, obviously it will be compressed a little bit down again. So one of the, this would be the part where I should say, okay, let's leave it for now. This is a good setting to unmute the bass lines, because in the end, that has to be there as well. And this can mess the whole thing up again. So let me first show you what I have here. And as this track is a collaboration track with guys from America. So I have here like audio files mixed with new plugins. That's the way we did this collaboration track. So what the guys were sending me was this thing, and basically it was a very hard EDM kind of track, which I didn't want to do. I wanted to make it a little bit more groovy. So that's the reason why you can see that these audio files have been edited a bit. So to show you a bit of what it was. This was more or less the idea, but I think this is, you know, maybe too rough for this time of what the scene is going to. So what I did is cut them a little bit. Some short notes, but that's just a creative thing. But you know what I'm trying to say here is that this whole EDM with these long kind of kick tails, it's a little bit done. If I receive that for freeway recordings, the first thing that I try to do is, okay, is the melody great? Because if the melody is great, then I can change the production, give feedback to change whatever is underneath it. But you know, if it's a straightforward EDM track, it's already a no-go for me, because you know, you cannot make business out of that anymore. So that was also the reason in this case where I found this melody very good, but not the way that it was done. So I changed that. to make it a little bit more, in my opinion, a bit more edgy, not just straightforward long kick tails, but just like this. But what I think that there is not so much information going on in this track and in this bass. And what I mean with that is that there's a lot of high frequencies and a lot of sub-frequencies, but what I really need here is information. What is the note playing? If I'm listening to a track and if I do a mix and mastering, if I listen to every separated track, there has to be the relevant information. And the way I compare that is if I was a person who was writing notes, creating an arrangement, I had to listen to the track and I should be able to write down in notes what I'm hearing. So I'm going to try to put that information inside that element, because otherwise it's just like, yeah, well, what note is it playing then, So, and more or less, I know that there are a lot of people are trying to make it sound fat by boosting a lot of the low frequencies. That's also what I heard a little bit in the demos that I heard yesterday from maybe a few of you guys that are here. To make it fat, they are boosting, but there's a difference between between low frequencies which you actually hear or which you are feeling. And I think the frequencies that you are feeling you can easily add in your mastering, by just boosting whatever 48 hertz or so. But I think the actual information is going on somewhere in the middle. And that's the reason why for this bass, I came up with this EQ setting, boosting it in the middle. Maybe not so logic to do that on a bass, but in my ears, there's some information added now. So I have the feeling that I hear what it's playing now. If I'm just let it play and then then I bypass this plugin, then you will hear the difference. At some point it's gone. And also the guys who was delivering this bass sound to me was doing the same. They were making the smile curve. And the smile curve, which means a lot of low frequencies and a lot of high frequencies, like this, is, it sounds sexy. If you play that to a girl, she's instantly like, oh, that's nice. But obviously, at some point there, you have to translate this, and that's the part where I would say, the translation of this kind of mix to a festival should be like the opposite of the smile curve, because the sound systems that they have there is already, again, the smile curve, because they have a bunch of, bass boxes like what you see here. And, I think that what you see here is the right balance, because this is what they do for bass, and that's what they do for the higher frequencies. So there are so many bass already going on. So if you are doing a mix and you really want to have a mix which is, easy to follow which notes are actually playing, you have to search in the middle. So this is what I did for this bass. And apart from that, I wanted to add a little bit more information even. So I created a layer. Well, like this, it sounds like an old computer game. But, I just want to have this going on between my kicks to make this bass line a bit more clear. So first of all, then you add the sidechain. And this is my favorite sidechain plugin, because, you can just draw a line and that's your sidechain. And you can just get creative with it. But for this one, it's just like an offbeat kind of sidechain. Like this, it already makes a little bit more sense. But what I feel here is that there's a lot of information going on in the middle. But I don't need the subs of this sound, and I also don't need the higher frequencies of these sounds. So if you look at my equalizer, you see that there's just a range going on between, let's say, 150 hertz until 1K. And then it would sound like this. Still sounds ugly, but if you are mixing this with the other bass, it just gives some tonal information, you know, and that's basically what I do with the low frequencies. I just try to find layers to make it more clear what the actual note is. But sometimes it's just hard because there's already a lot of information coming from it, and that's the thing that I really have against plugins like Nexus or whatever. You know, if you are thinking about the guys who have to sell the Nexus to you, the thing that they are doing is they create nice demos with, you know, the songs that are almost sounding like hits, and if you are playing every preset has it all the frequencies, all the layers, and all the reverb, because then you think, oh wow, this plugin is great, I'm going to buy it. But in the end, if you are putting it in your production, then it's almost undoable to mix all those big sounds together. So when I'm using a Nexus, which I do a lot, obviously, the first thing often is to just remove all those reverbs and to make the sound a little bit smaller again. Because if you are doing a mixing and mastering, the thing that I put in my mind is that I have just like 100% and that's it. So every sound, let's say if you have 100 sounds, they all have 1%. So if the sounds are too big, other sounds would have less than 1%. You know, so that's the game I try to play with myself if I'm doing this mixing and master job. And obviously, in the end, the kick and bass combination would be even more than 1% each. That might be even like 40% of the whole production. So that means that I really have to take care of the complete dynamic range, not too much layers going on. You know, sometimes people think that there's a solution in, okay, I missed something, let's see if we can find another sound to solve that. But what if you just, you know, look a bit longer to your equalizer, or maybe try another equalizer? You know, all those equalizers have their own color, so just, you know, sometimes try. And that's the reason why I use Logic, because it, you know, if you just use the simple equalizer, it's just simple to create a nice sound, and the kind of taste that the Logic equalizer gives is just fairly flat. So that's nice, you know. But if you really want to do some nice things, for your master, for instance, there are a lot of nice SSL kind of plugins and stuff, but I will come back to that a bit later. So that's the kick and bass combination in the drop. And now let me just check if it's still comparable to this Secrets track of Kashmir and Tiesto. Okay, well, for what I'm hearing here, this is obviously not my studio, but fair enough, you know? Maybe not finished, but let's go further. Then the next big element is the lead sound. Tell me.
The side change you prefer to do if you have many basses, you
Yeah.
select one and you focus on it. If you suppose you have three or two basses, the side changing with the kick.
Well, it just depends on what you have and what you also groove-wise want to achieve, because you know basically the sidechain exists to solve problems. That was the reason why that already was in the 60s. They used sidechain already, but house music wasn't even there. So, but what I also do sometimes is to create audio files with the bass line. And if you work in a collaboration situation like this, I got the audio file delivered. You see that there's a lot of fading going on instead of using sidechain, because I just decide how long a sound may exist, you know, and I don't need a sidechain for that then, because you know if it's cut away, it's gone, you know. So if the most of the time when I do sidechaining on bass lines, it's when I use a plugin. So if it's audio files, I just do cutting. Not in this production, but in other productions, I just make a group in the end, and that group then will be sidechained. Well, the next big thing, because you just have this 100%, and I think a few things should be, you know, they are the most important. It's the kick, it's the bass, and of course the lead sound, because that's basically the song. The rest, I consider making a song the same as painting, you know, and if you are painting a person, that person is is important, that has to be great, but the rest is like background. So my claps is part of the groove, but reverbs are also part of the background and the way you make your sound a little bit more 3D-ish. So that's the next thing that I'm going to unmute. And this is actually the way that I'm really working always, because if you have your main elements there, the rest is just to fill in gaps. So what I have here is a package, also a combination of what I got delivered from the guys that I did this collaboration with some layers that I did myself. This is what it sounds like. But then without any processing, of course. This is where it started with. But as you can see in this equalizer, I did some boosting around 1K, and 1K is a frequency part where there is a lot of information going on for lead sounds. This is what happens if I bypass this equalizer. Still sounds nice, but this is what's happening when you unbypass this equalizer. There's a lot of more information going on. And you know, basically when you are using a Nexus kind of plugin, because I don't know for 100% sure, but what I can hear, I think it's the Nexus, there's some kind of a dip in the 3500 Hertz. So if I am using the Nexus, one of the things, if I really would like to make a decision, if I whether or not would like to use a certain preset, I just boost around 3500 Hertz already. So I already got more information while searching for the right preset. But that's a little personal tricky. Well, then I added 2 layers. This is coming from the serum with not so much equalization going on, just a little bit higher frequencies to open it up a little bit. But this is more to create a mono image, because the lead sound that I got was very wide, and it's always nice to create a great wide sounding thing, but there still are situations in which a too wide master would sound like a lot of noise coming to you without any information. So I'm always trying to find one sound which is just like panned as mono as I can, and that's the thing that I put in the middle of the layering part. And that's always a kind of sound like this, because no, it just gives a lot of information. Tell me.
Yeah, I think somebody yesterday said that it has to be like the main sound that you put in mono. Do you feel like it always needs to be the main sound that you have in mono and the supporting synths in like stereo?
I think that's a creative question, to be honest. Technically, yeah, well, why not? Because in the end, it has to be in your face what's going on. If you are using a vocal, it's also the main vocal most of the time is just mono in the middle. But if it's not a nice sound, if you find a very great preset, which you think, wow, this is a hit, but if it's not mono, well, then I think you still should be able to use it. But then, you know, if it's a tacky kind of sound within, you know, an electro kind of drop, I would try to use a mono acoustic guitar, but then only take the first transient to have something going on in the middle. At least the rule, in my opinion, should be that there should be something in the middle. But I'm not saying that that's the most important thing. Because what I think here is that the main sound is this one, completely stereo, and then the sound that I'm adding here is the supporting sound. So it's the other way around then. Tell me.
Is there any way of checking if a lead is too stereo or is it just training your ears?
Yeah, there is a way of checking, and what you can do here, I will jump to the mastering part here to let you see how I at least do this checking. You have this plugin in which you open up the stereo image, and instead of what a lot of technicians are saying that you cannot use it on a master, I'm using it on a master. And well, it's pretty open. But there is also a mono button in here, which you can press. And if your sound is, well, let's not say too stereo, but too much in phase or out of phase, you will hear that it's just going away. And in this case, let me see, where's my sound? There's no sound anymore. If the sound is still alive, then it's okay. At least that's what I believe in. There are so many ways of approaching phase in a production, but for me, I think that 95% of the situations where you play this music have stereo sound systems. So for 95%, you can do whatever the fuck you like. But you know, for instance, I made a mistake once, but that was in a Dutch kind of music, you know, and I was doing too much on stereo enhancement stuff. And then someday I wake up, but next to my bed there is just this, you know, the thing that wakes you up, but that has only one speaker. And later I found out that to create that mono sound that comes out of a speaker like that is to do left plus right minus 20 dBs is that mono signal which is coming out of that. And half of my production was gone. So what I hear was some drums and the vocal, and the rest was vanished because of the phase problems. So since that moment, I'm just checking mono things, but you can do that within this isotope imaging thing. So the rule is, if your sound is still there, and not too much change, you're good to go. Okay, then you have this layer for that information. Then there's this other one layer, which is also mono as fuck. But that's because this lead sound that I got from the guys was so stereo that I needed to find something that was going on in the middle. Because, you know, there is a stereo image going on, but a stereo image doesn't necessarily mean that should be only stereo things. It's an image, but that means that there's also something in the middle going on. So this package, at least in my ears, worked together fine. Then to glue them a little bit together, at least I want them to have the same sidechain settings. So I made a bus. They are going to the same sidechain. And although the sample was already, the one I got from the guys from America, was already sidechained, I wanted to do this sidechain. And as you can see, instead of starting with 0, like the most of the presets are in this kind of plugins, I started by giving it a little bit of the attack, so it is actually playing on the kick drum. But if you are not doing that, you just lose the half of your melody. So I make the decision to not sidechain it that hard, and that would sound like this. And still I have the feeling that I missed some information, because, you know, the kick is quite bright and the lead sounds are a little bit behind my kick. But as the word already says it's the lead sound, so it has to have that leading frequencies. And the hit, if this track is a hit, is already, it's packed in that melody, so that melody has to be in your face. So that's the reason why I'm again boosting these frequencies, which are around 500 hertz, where there's this middle segment where a lot of information is going on. Again, around 1 and 2K. But also this 3500 hertz. Those are 3 main segments where you can find information in your lead sounds. So this is what happens if I unbypass this plugin. I think that makes a lot of difference. You know, it's not even that it's more open, it's just in your face. So now I have my 3 elements going on here in a way that that I'm convinced. Tell me.
You told me that they already use the sidechain.
Yeah.
How do you get it to be your sidechain to be equal with?
Not.
I was already afraid of that.
Yeah. Well, there is a way. You can ask for the preset of the setting. You can ask for a screenshot. or you can just go by your ears. And that's what I was doing in this case. You know, I heard that it was just pumping, so it was 0 on the kick, which means that you are not having information of the melody while your kick is playing, and I didn't want that. So maybe in the end, there is now a mix between 2 different sidechains. But who cares? You know, it doesn't have to necessarily be the exact sidechain. What I would like to achieve is some sound complexity in your mix. You know, if you are doing everything in a straightforward way, I can listen to your mix and just redo it easily. But if it's just now different sidechains, different reverbs, it starts getting to be more complex, and that's, in my opinion, it's also more interesting. So, no, I don't know what sidechain they used, but this is how I think it sounds nice, you know, and that's the thing that I trust. So let me now check what's happening if I compare this to the Kashmir and Chesto track again. And so if you can see, I'm just doing this for an hour or so, and I compared it already like 5 or 6 times. So which means that I'm taking existing tracks to, you know, to use to inspire me and to compare it and to keep comparing. Also, a lot of mistakes can occur if you are doing this comparison. One of the things that you have to check when you are doing straightforward electro kind of tracks is the key. Because if you are doing a key, for instance, in E, there's a lot of sub-frequencies going on. And if you then compare it to a track which is in A, you might think the track is in the same genre, but still the complete frequency spectrum is different. So that's just a little side tip. If you are comparing a track, take one which is in the same key. Okay, level-wise, it's already getting there a little bit. Of course, it's another track, so it will never be exactly the same. But still, I miss a lot of image in my stereo thing. So that's the next thing in my master, because now I have my 3 elements. And I think that now I should just finish my mastering first, and then go back to putting in all the other instruments. Because then if everything is just like fine, and your master is set, then I can just, if I use a clap, can find the space where I can put this clap in. So that's a slightly different approach, because most of the engineers would like to make a good mix first and then do the mastering. But as this loudness war was going on and still is going on, I think I should make my loudness thing first and then search for those gaps where I can put in extra sounds. So to create more space for all the things that I'm doing, I'm now opening up my stereo imager, which in real life is already open from the point where I start mixing, because then I can count with it. You know, there's a lot of phase going on, and sometimes if you are having your complete mix and you would do your, you open up your stereo image in the end, your whole mix is gone, the whole balance has changed. So that's the reason to, you know, to open up your stereo image as fast as you can. So this is what it sounds like if I would open it up, and as you can see, yesterday I told that I sometimes make my subs mono. In this case, there's a lot of information going on in these subs with some chorus kind of effects from on the lead sounds or on the bass sounds from the guys that I got. So I decided to leave it open. Already from 140 Hertz until 2K, it's already like pretty open, and this is what it would sound like. I don't know what is the stereo image of these speakers here, but at least on these speakers, this sounds like if somebody is not having the speakers here, but there, you know? So if you would just image that visually, what you create then is more space, because if I put these speakers here, then I only have, you know, what is it, 60 centimeters to put things in, and if I put the speakers aside, there's just more space. So that's the way I look at stereo imaging. So for me, that's an important thing, because I always like to put in so many effects and stuff to make it more special. So I need that space to put it in. Then still, if I compare it to this Kashmir track, I need some, I have a few frequencies that I'm really missing. But I already did this dynamic equalization with the C4. So after that, I'm going to use an equalizer, which I use a lot on my mastering because it's just so good. And it even isn't intended to be a mastering equalizer because they have different specifications. But this is just an SSL channel. So this is supposed to be on just every single channel, at least on an SSL desk, but also in this kind of productions. But I'm using it for a master, and that's also a thing of trusting yourself and your own ears, because you can just buy or download a bunch of plugins, and when it says, this is a master equalizer. Yeah, okay, you can say that, but if I think it works fine on a kick drum, then for me it's a kick drum equalizer. So in this case, this is a channel EQ, but for me, this is a master EQ. And I boosted here some frequencies on the highest part because I miss my top frequencies here. And this equalizer has some preset where if you just boost the presetted frequencies, it already starts to sound very brilliant. And this is what's happening then. So it's a little difference, but it's on the highest frequencies. I'm going to exaggerate a little bit to show you which frequencies I do here. Also, the result is then to have the sound a little bit more in your face. But this is also a dangerous thing because your complete mix can start to sound a bit thin. But let's go back to the setting that I already had. Well, I'm already pretty happy with this sound. I don't want to sound it exactly the same, and it's not possible to have it exactly the same because I'm using other sounds. But if someone would play this track after Secrets from Kashmir and Tiesto, I think, you know, the level of production is still going on. The only thing that I have to take care of now is the dynamic range. And the dynamic range, I use this meter for, because I think it really gives you a lot of relevant information. And it's the master checker from Nugan Audio. And what it says here is what is my level, but also the PLR, so my peaks. And that's one of the things that, in the end, if you play a track like this on a festival, of course there is a lot of limiting and compression going on in all those sound systems that they have there. So if there's a lot of peaks going on in your track, those peaks will trigger those compressors of the sound system there. So you have to get rid of peaks that you actually are not really hearing, but they are there. So let me see what's happening now when I play this without my peak limiter. As you can see, minus 4.9, that's the average level of this track, which is fucking loud. Because, you know, in the end, if you look at the Kashmir track, it's minus 5.5, so it's even louder. But what you also see is that there is a lot of peaks going on. Like 10 dBs of peaks, which is way too much. And then if I compare this to the Kashmir track, you will find out that there was peak limiting going on. And the way to check what the actual level of another track and the peaks of another track are, is to use this AB plugin and on the master channel put this meter after the AB plugin. So also the tracks you are comparing with are going through this meter, so you can actually see what is the level of those tracks. So what you see here, well, it's going down now, but what you could see if the track is playing, mine is like around peaking 10 dBs. and Kashmir is around 6. So that's better. You know, those peaks, I don't hear those peaks anymore because it's already compressed a few times and stuff, but still there are peaks. Well, for that I used the Pro L from FabFilter to just get rid of those peaks that I do not want to hear. And as you can see, it's doing a lot. But then you have to go in this advanced modus, because this is the way the plugin opens up. And here's a segment where you can go in advanced. There are certain presets, and the one that I'm using here is punchy. Because it just sounds nice, you know, you just skip some presets. For me, it's punchy, and this is my the thing that I use almost on every production to get rid of those peaks you don't hear, but they exist. And as you can see, my attack and release time are just like in the middle a bit. Also, if you compare this to the C4 settings, they were like attack time around 90 milliseconds. Here it also is around 100 milliseconds. So still, I'm not cutting away those peaks on my kick, because still I accept the fact that my kick is popping through. But I leave my kick playing for like 100 milliseconds, and then this limiter kicks in. Basically, there is not so much difference in sound. The only thing that you hear is that there's something changing in the higher frequencies, but I don't care about that, because if I lose some kind of those frequencies, I just make sure that I push them back in. But in this case, I think my mix was a little bit too harsh, so I'm quite happy with what this limiter is doing, because it just gives a little bit more color and taste to this track. And as you can see here, my peaks are just also around 6 now. So I'm going to bypass the limiter, and then you can see on the meter what actually is happening, but without the sound changing so much. So this is where it starts, 6. And if I'm not doing it, it's almost sometimes 12. So there's a big problem solved here without changing the sound too much. Well, so basically now my drop is kind of set. I think that I'm on the level where I want to be. And there's just one thing that I would like to do, is take out a little bit more of the dynamic range still, so it sounds a little bit more controlled. And for that I use my final limiter. So as you can see, I'm using 2 limiters in a row, one to get rid of those peaks, and one to just set a limit to the point where I just want to have this track limited. And for me, that's the max volume. That's the top limiter I could use, because here I'm getting rid of 2 or 3 dBs of the total level without hearing it. So if I use it or not, the sound is exactly the same. But as you can see on this gain reduction part, you see that there's just like another 2 or 3 dBs get rid of. Without losing the sound. So that's also the beneficial part of just using a few plugins in a row who are doing almost the same, but not too much. So basically that's my sound now. This is, I'm happy with it. And then the next thing was to unmute everything which is playing in the break. And for the break I'm going to do exactly the same. But as I see the time going by, I'm going to do it a little bit faster. But the idea is the same, to just put in the main elements first. And for me, that starts with the vocal part. let me see where this vocal is here.
So hold your tongue till this day. We've got to change, we've gone too low.
Okay, so what I'm doing on all my vocals, because somehow, you know, most of the vocals are not recorded in the best studios. And I always say that the biggest hits are coming from, you know, home studios, and, you know, we call them the bedroom bangers. People make them on easy equipment. And I think this vocal has been recorded in a simple studio. I wasn't there when the vocal was recorded, but what I can hear is that there's a lot of going on, which means that the microphone wasn't more expensive than a few $100. But you can get rid of that. And as you can see, there is a bunch of tracks which has the name voc or vocal or whatever. So there are a few effects and stuff, but they are all based on the same vocal recording. And so I route them all to one bus, and I start doing the tweaking of the vocal on that bus then. And one of the things you see here is this transient designer, which is called the Trans X White from Waves. Waves is one of my favorite bundles, by the way. They have a solution for everything. And officially it's not free, but it's free. So you can use all the things. And what you want to get rid of, or what you in the end would like to achieve with the vocal, that it starts to sound a little bit silky. So if I'm trying to sing, I'm not going to sing, but if I would do something, it shouldn't be like, if I would use a word with S, like start, I don't want it to sound like start. I want it to have like start, like easy. You know, if you sing a song about love or whatever, there is not a girl in the world which would like it if you scream in her ear, I love you. No, you want, I love you, you know. So that's also what you try to achieve with your vocal. It shouldn't be too screamy. It shouldn't be annoying in a way. So one of the first things that I'm going to get rid of is those pops and clicks and stuff. And that's what I do with this transient designer. And the transient designer just detects where there are some peaks and simply cut them away. Which is not at all the same as a compressor, by the way. First, I'm going to do the opposite to find the right settings, and then you will hear what it's doing.
Got ties to cut and worlds to let go. So hold your tongue till this day.
For me, this really sounds annoying. You know, on every T and S there is a pop, but of course this is exaggerated the opposite way. But can you imagine what would happen if you would do those shit kind of things? You take it away, then this is what's happening.
Hold your tongue till this day is done. And if you're...
For me, in my ears, it already sounds like, you know, it's very... Fuck, I don't know the English word, aangenaam for the Dutch guys. Flat, what? Thank you.
Hold your tongue.
But still there is a lot of tongue, you know, going on, and for that I use a de-esser. And I use that before this transient designer, because I want to get rid of the things that the de-esser detects before going into this transient designer.
Hold your tongue. Hold your tongue.
So what you see here, that it responds to the T on the tongue.
Hold your tongue. Hold your tongue.
Which basically means that this is, it's called a de-esser, but it does the same as a multi-band compressor, but then this is just one band. And you can use it in a few ways, but it's just more or less compressing one part of the frequency spectrum. And in this case, it's been set to 5500 hertz, because that's where the annoying resonance kind of is going on.
Hold your tongue.
So if you zoom into this this part of the sentence, the tongue, the way it's been recorded, the way he says it, for me now sounds pleasant. And if I would remove these plugins,
Hold your tongue. Hold your tongue.
they will start to hear those peaks again. Hold your tongue.
Hold your tongue.
And now with this processing.
Hold your tongue.
So there's, there's one thing. This is something that you have to do to make it sound pleasant in general. But this is also a thing that you should do to be able to push the vocal a bit louder. Because if those peaks are going on, that's also influencing your master because it's simply level. There's sound going on. So all those sounds, first of all, they don't sound nice, but also they are destroying your master. So that's gone now.
Hold your tongue till this day.
Well, if you zoom into what I did on the vocal itself, this is the buzz. Here I get rid of negative things, mistakes that have occurred during the recording, but because if you would use, higher level equipment, a better microphone, whatever, an analog SSL desk or so to make the preamp and the compression and stuff, you will not have these side effects. But I'm happy that these kind of plugins exist because, the studio is getting cheaper and the facilities where they actually do the microphone recording are, it's just bedroom hits, so they don't have that equipment. Here you see that there are 2 equalizers going on. Both of them are doing just a few things. The first one, here you can see that there is one dip in the frequency spectrum, and I'm going to show you why I took that one away.
Hold your tongue to hold your tongue till this day. Hold your tongue.
I left all the compression on, so normally when you do this, you will start like doing this. But there, basically, because of the way that it's been recorded, the placement of the microphone, the room where you were in, is causing resonance. If I hear myself talking in this room, I think there's a lot of 200 or 300 hertz going on. So if I would record it and put it back here, I could find a resonance around that. And in this case, there is a resonance around 6700 hertz. And you can just easily find those resonances. And I think that noisy kind of thing that's on top of this vocal now is very unpleasant to listen to. So I'm just going to get rid of it to make it more relaxed.
Hold your tongue till this day.
Also, the difference is that you are annoyed by this noisy kind of resonance which is up there. So if you take it away, the vocal starts to sound like a vocal again. That's what at least what I experience if I take it down.
Hold your tongue till this day. Hold your.
Now it sounds like a singer again. But if you just want to search for more of those, resonances, you just open another equalizer and just try to find them and not cut out too many of them. But there are always some resonances going on. And then what I just do then is to create a notch like this and just try to find where those are.
Hold your tongue till this day. Hold your tongue till this day. Hold your tongue.
Here there's one. Just take it out a little bit.
Hold your tongue.
Well, sometimes I hear tracks on the radio with a very silky kind of vocal, and sometimes people ask me, how can you achieve a voice like that? Because when I'm just putting down a microphone and start recording a track, I never have that super silky sound. Well, if you just take out all these resonances, like 15 times on different parts of the frequency spectrum, you will start to have that kind of silky sound. Personally, I love it, because what I just said, if I say I love you, I don't want to hear it by screaming, but it has to have some softness in there. The other equalizer, which is already there, is just boosting a little bit of some frequencies, which is based on taste. There's no technical reason for doing this. This is just turning knobs until the point where I think, oh wow, now it sounds nice.
Hold your tongue till this day.
And as you can hear, there's just, I was searching for more information. because based on the recording itself, there was a lot of going on. But I really would like, if the track is on low volume, I still would like to be able to follow what the guy actually is singing. And in this case, there was this vocal included, the reverb and stuff was delivered. So I cannot do less or more reverb. So I have to find within this recording, I have to find some information. And when it comes to vocals, it's always around 500 hertz where the real lyric is.
Hold your tongue till this day.
It's also when we are talking, it's around 3,500 hertz, 500 hertz, where the actual information is going. If you're getting older, you will lose your 3,500 hertz a bit, and then you start asking people to repeat what they're actually saying, because the information of how you can understand what someone is saying is around those frequencies. So that's in real life, but in your productions, you basically have to do the same.
Hold your tongue.
So that's for the vocal. That was the main element here. Then there are a few elements underneath.
Hold your tongue till this day.
I'm always trying to find, when it comes to the break, as much atmosphere as I can get. Not by only using instruments, like just a piano with a vocal or whatever, but also atmosphere, because I really like this 3D kind of productions where you have something in your face, something behind, and really something moving in the back. So I have this kind of things going on. And then I tweak that with just some effect things. This is a great plugin for stuff like that, the Camel Fat. This is what it's doing. This is just, chords and then reversed, and then put on some, this is just a preset. To be honest, I'm not even tweaking this, it's just skipping presets until I find something which is nice and works with the sound that I'm putting in. So here's another thing that creates atmosphere. It's just a simple plug, but then with a shitload of reverb. And together with that other sound, it sounds like this. So there's a little bit of question and answer going on. They both have their own spot. What I'm doing when you look at the EQs, I'm just taking away a lot of the lower frequencies to not get it disturbed by the bass or the other way around. And the rest is just some colorization towards taste, but not so much other things going on. These are the specific sounds that I would never like to compress, for instance, because then it would just sound too squeezed, and that's not what I like. I just want to have an open sound, so I just leave the sounds as they are. Then there is some bass going on here. This one is a recording of a Moog, which I actually have in the studio, so that's the reason why it's an audio file. It's an external thing that I just recorded. And what I wanted to do here is to create a real fundament. So there is something going on in the sub-frequencies here. So that's the reason why I just boosted everything under 200 hertz. But this, in my opinion, sounds fat. Also because it was coming from a real Moog. But there's not so much information going on again. So I had to find something which is giving me that information. And I would like to do that with this sound. But like this, it just, as you can see, it's just a simple default thing from Logic. But I only wanted to have that part of information that I was missing in that sub thing that I was having in Moog. And that was this, because this together with the Moog would sound like this. So here I covered three things. I have the fundament, I have the information, and I have some rhythmical information. Because I just, if the break comes down, I still want to keep on doing some energetic stuff. So I have to put in some rhythmical information without using drum loops or so. So that's the reason why I'm trying to find some movement in the bass.
Hold your tongue till this day is done. And if you're here.
This is the part where I have to make a decision if the... Oh, tell me.
One of the things you often hear is that you need to keep the lower frequencies mono,
Yeah.
force them to be mono.
Mhm.
Is that something you put attention to, or you just leave it like that?
Well, in this production, I left them like they were. Normally, I would say, here you have the master channel with this stereo imager. For me, it would sound very logical to go down here to 90 hertz and to mono out everything which is underneath it. But, you know, sometimes in this case, I was like maybe even forgetting to do it. And I was like, okay, well, it sounds nice, so I don't care. I don't think there is a specific technical reason to force yourself to do that in mono, to be honest.
You don't use linear phase EQ on your master channel.
The in-your-face EQ?
Linear phase.
A linear phase? No. No, basically, I think that I found my way of doing it without linear phase EQs. And to be honest, I still need to understand what would be the benefit of doing that. There is benefit, of course, but for me personally, so far I didn't discover the thing that, the reason for doing it. I think even what you see here is that there is some volume automation going on the master. So this is the drop, and then you can see that I'm going down. Well, it's very low. I hope you can see it. Ja, maar ik kan niet scrollen. And as you can see, it's going down, but it's not the main volume which is going down. What I am automating here is the gain of the first plugin in the row of masters. So, of the mastering. So what I'm actually doing, you can see it move here. And I think that's visible for all of you now. Drop is gone, so it goes down for the break. What this means is that the drop is really compressed very hard because I want that energetic sound going on in the drop. But in the break, I have to tell my story. There is the lyric, there is the information of the singer. I don't want that to sound so compressed as the master. And instead of automating all those compressors which are going on, I can also hit the master chain less hard. So what I'm doing here is basically go down with the mix, so in the breaks, the compressors have, you know, it's easier for the compressors. They don't have to work that much. And then once they are, the drop is coming back, you see that there is automation going on towards the drop.
When the dust clears, we have won. We have won.
So at the point where the drop kicks in again, it's at that level again. So the master chain is maxed out at that point. So based on the time, I think this was my part. Now there is, I think, some room for questions. At least what I tried to do here is put on the main elements. You can imagine that, you know, if you are having effects or whatever, you can, if you are already on this stage and you have your main elements there and your sound is already there and it works between other tracks, then it's easier to find the right level for an uplifter effect, or it's easier to find the right level for, you know, less important information. And that all, of course, is also based on your taste. So this is my story. This is all coming from my own experience. I'm not saying that this is the only way, but what I know is that sometimes we have 4 studios in the White Villa Studios. That's my company. And sometimes in a week we have to deliver between 15 and 20 songs, which means that every studio has to deliver 1 song in 1 day. We discovered with the producers that we work there that this is the fastest way, at least for us, but we are with 4 producers and all of them think the same, the fastest way to achieve that sound. just by putting down your main elements first. And as you can see, I was starting today with almost an empty screen when it comes to doing mix. This is also the way I do the mix. So if I have my whole arrangement covered, I have every element which is there. There always comes a point where I just go down with all the levels, bypass all the plugins, and then start to redo it channel by channel to see if along the production process I'd made the right choices, and to see if there are no hidden sounds anymore, because back in the days when I wasn't doing this, I sometimes discovered, oh shit, there's an effect, but it's so low on level that you actually are not hearing it anymore, but it is there, so it takes space. So it's also a good way to just discover all the elements which are there and to make the decision if it's necessary to keep them. So that's it. There is room for questions, so if you have one, shoot.
Yeah, I was wondering, because the sounds on themselves already sound quite cool, at least in my experience right here.
Mm-hmm.
How much of the sound, actually sound design, how much is sound design value towards this whole mixing process? I understand it.
That's a very relevant question.
I always get a bit overwhelmed by this.
Yeah, but this, you can only do a good mixing and master if your choice of sounds and the sound design in the end has been done the right way. So that should have been another masterclass where you zoom in on how to make a synthesizer sound or whatever. But if you are not working with the right sounds, you first have to solve the fact that the right sounds aren't there yet. That's also, if you compare that to that vocal, that wasn't recorded in a way that's very wow. So, I have to solve some problems first. That's also what's happening if you're not having the right synth or the right basses. But that's also a matter of just spending more time. If I'm making an arrangement like this, well, sometimes it just takes 4 days, full days of searching for the right kick, trying another kick, trying another clap, So it's not happening so fast. There's so much time already in this production, but I believe that that's the only way to create something different. And also to create something which is filling up the full frequency spectrum, because that's in the end what you're looking for. Cool. More questions?
Do you have a favorite way of starting a project? Do you always start with a kick, or do you try to make a melody first?
Yeah, well, what I try to do the most, if I do tracks with which, it depends on what kind of track you're doing. If you are doing a track like this, if I would make it on my own, because this is collaboration, so I got things delivered, but if I would start with an empty screen, I would start trying to find a kick which at that moment is pleasing my feeling. Just kick, let's see what I feel. Then try to find some bass lines and to make them work together. And that's already the part where I already also start mastering, to see if my kick-bass combination works good with certain master settings. And that's already also the point where I start A-Bing with other tracks, to see if what I'm doing in that low end would still be alive between 2 other tracks, for instance. So kick-bass combination. But sometimes if you got a vocal from a publishing company or whatever, then it starts by making a chord progression and to see what kind of drop you would like to do. So the process is different, but I make a lot of club tracks, and with club tracks I start with kick-bass combinations.
Yeah, when you're creating your bass line, do you always also create a sub bass?
Yeah.
A normal bass line, or is it like the same note?
Yeah. It depends on what key you're in. Let's say if you are in F, G, and A, sometimes E, it can be exactly the same. But for instance, if you are working in C, then sometimes or the sub will be too high or too low. Then I would separate those channels onto 2 channels and give them both another EQ. Sometimes when you have to do a melody and the highest note in your bass line is not giving you enough sub-frequencies anymore, then I separate that to another channel and then boost the sub-frequencies or make an octave, or depends on what sound it is.
You're more of a guy that wants to have the control and move around things.
Yeah.
When you have a sound, a nice synth like Silent or Nexus, are you forcing yourself to not using the standard reverbs on it?
No. Yeah, well, most of the time I'm cutting away the basic things. But that's also because I'm really, apart from being in control, I want to be original. And if I'm just taking a preset with the presetted reverb, you can do it as well. So that's, if I would like to create some differences in my production, that's also a part of the creative aspect of it. So I would like to work with my own reverbs. And also when I was starting this morning, I was saying that I have a very analog mind. That's the way they used to do it. Dry sounds, send them to a bus, to a reverb. And I also would like to work on that reverb. It's not only putting on a reverb, but if you see my reverb channels, there's also a lot of processing going on the reverb itself to make it more, different.
How did you make the kick in this project?
How did I make the kick in this project? To be honest, I have to check which kick it is. Well, as you can see, it has the name We Have One Kick, which to me means that it's a dedicated kick. Sometimes I just combine a few kicks. What I always do if I combine kicks, I try to find three things: a top, a middle, and a sub layer. And then I bounce them out together and to see if the waveform has a fairly logical form. Sometimes when you do kicks together and you bounce them out, you see that after the kick there is a gap or whatever. That means that there is phase within your layers. So it's good to just bounce them out to see what waveform you are creating. And once it's like this, then you're good to go. But then, the three elements can be a top kick of whatever, something I sampled. I also use the kick drum synthesizer of Nicky Romero a lot, because there you can do a lot of tweaking with the subs and stuff. But I think the plugin in general has some weakness in it. I don't know why, but there's something there's an internal compressor or whatever is going on. So the real punch is never coming from the plugin, but the top and the sub can come from the plugin. Anyone?
I use the imager on my master as well, and sometimes on the side it'll tell me that I don't really have a phase issue, but whenever I switch it to mono, I do have a phase issue.
Mm-hmm.
So does that mean I should go try to make more of my instruments mono?
Could be. Yeah, you can fix that problem by adding another synth which is completely mono. That's the thing, because if you look at phase is something that reacts to each other. So if you are having things which are out of phase and playing and things which are in phase at the same time, they influence each other. That's the reason why you should only check your phase problems on the master. And if you do have your phase problems, you can just go down in stereo image on the separated channels. So if you have a lead sound with 5 layers, you can just image them like smaller, So that's also my way of working to never have phase problems, is to see that there is this image, and I have to have something in the middle, I have to have something around it, and around it, and around it. So not every layer of your sound has to have that same stereo image. So even if you're using a Nexus or whatever, and it sounds full stereo, why not make it a little bit smaller then? To just have every element next to each other.
So do you trust that on that? Because I use the isotope imager as well. So if it's telling me nothing's out of phase, can you really trust that?
The only thing...
Even when you switch it back over to mono, it's like, if I take it to a club, the club's going to be mono, and then it's like, I don't hear anything.
Mm-hmm. Well, the only thing that I trust is the mono button. The rest of what I see, all those visuals, I think they're very sexy, but it's not something that I look at. I trust my ears, and I trust the mono button. If it's still there when it's in mono, then it's just fine. Sometimes technicians are making a very big deal out of this. I don't. Just trust your ears.
All right, I'm afraid that's all we've got time for now.
Cool.
Have a big round of applause for John, everyone.
Thank you.